Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at AmericanExpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. You have a final interview for a job. You meet with the top leader of the organization, and you don't get an offer. What happened? Frank Smith is here to talk about interview red flags from an employer's perspective. He's the president of Mosaic Personnel. It's a recruiting firm that places great people in the right opportunities. He joins us from Portland, Oregon. Well, let's jump right into it, Frank. When you have that final interview as a candidate, what matters most to an employer?
One of the first things that I look for and one of the questions that I will ask is, why do you want the job that you've applied for? And if they can't give me a clear answer of what that looks like and why they want this job, why it helps them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish in their life, why it helps them get where they're trying to go, that's the first red flag for me, because they're really not aware of where they're trying to go, so they can't really make a good decision of whether or not this job helps them get where they need to be. So I'm looking for somebody that has a clear picture of why this job fits in their life right now, why it helps them accomplish what their personal purpose is or what their goals are in their life. And if they can't really clarify that to me when I ask them why they want the job that they're applying for, that's the first area that I start to get a flag on.
That's a huge red flag, Frank, but I'm curious, how does that happen? Because at this point, you're meeting with, the CEO or maybe your boss's boss, and you've probably been through 1 or 2 interviews. You've filled out an application. How could you not know the answer to that question?
I think it's really just a lack of self-awareness. It's sometimes you're just looking so close, you can't see the forest for the trees. You're just thinking about, I need a job, I need to get income coming in, which is understandable. We've all been in that spot before, but I'm looking for someone that aligns and fits with our organization and someone that working for us is going to get them where they want to go. And if they really don't have a clear picture of where they want to go, you'd be surprised how often you run into that. People just haven't given it that much thought. They're just looking for the next job that might lead them somewhere, but they really don't know where that is. And so I find that usually down the road means they either don't stay with me for very long, or they're unhappy because they really didn't stop and think about what our culture was or how they aligned with our business and the job. And it usually ends up to be dissatisfactory for both of us in a pretty short amount of time. But I find that a lot. People don't really have a clear thought about where they're trying to get to. They just are trying to get the job. We get so tied up in, I just need the job, I want to win this interview, that you forget about the bigger picture.
What's your best advice for how to prepare an answer to that question? What do you think candidates should do?
Yeah, what always impresses me is when someone is just like, here's where I'm trying to get to. Here's where I feel like my skill sets would serve this job. Here's what I enjoy doing and what I'm trying to, and your job helps me build these additional skills in order to get where I'm trying to go. That's the kind of answer I'm looking for. I don't expect them to stay with me for 20 years. So even if where they're trying to go doesn't fit into our organization, if I can be a piece of that for 3 or 4 years and they know where they're trying to get, that just tells me a little bit about their mindset and that they are good at setting goals and knowing where they're heading and what works and what doesn't work to help get them there, which is an important skill set that I'm looking for when I'm hiring someone to get the work done. What is it going to take to get this? What does the end project look like? Do they have that ability to paint that clear picture and know what steps it's going to take to get them from here to there? So I think just them knowing where they're trying to go and giving that some thought and understanding if this job helps is really the best thing that they can do. And then just be honest with that in the interview and tell me, where are you trying to get to and how does the job fit that?
In that final interview, you might be one of 2 or 3 candidates. Why do employers talk to more than one candidate in that final round? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think for me, part of it is I like to have multiple interactions with a candidate. The more people talk, the more you kind of find out what's really underlying the situation. So they may tell you one thing in the first interview, but if you have a chance to talk to them multiple times through 2 or 3 stages of interview process, you might start to hear different answers, which gets back to that first piece is they may not be really being honest with you about where they're trying to get. So it's important to have, I think, multiple steps in the interview process for certain positions. And then also, the other piece of that I would say is I'm looking for what makes one person stand out over another, and clarity of purpose and all that for me is something that definitely stands out. So if I have 3 people that have all met the qualifications and they've all done a good job in the first round of interviews, these last questions are kind of really designed to figure out who has a clearer picture of what they're trying to accomplish, what they want in a job, and I'll usually pick that person that seems to be more focused and clear versus the person who's like, well, anything really works for me. That just doesn't excite me as much when I'm interviewing somebody.
You're speaking from the perspective of a CEO. Often in that final round of interviews, a candidate might meet not only with the CEO or the top boss of an organization, but other people as well on the leadership team or perhaps future colleagues. What are those people looking for when they sit down with a candidate who's part of a final round of interviews?
Yeah. The first thing they're looking for, obviously, is, qualifications. We've seen their resume. Do they really seem to be able to talk the talk that was on their resume and understand the role that they're looking for? This is what I've done. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. So in the first round, you're trying to look and make sure that they have the skill set that you actually need. For us, then, as we move up, we're looking a little bit more big picture of, how does this fit in? But in that first round, we're looking more for, do you have the experience? Do you have the skills that we think it takes in order to be a great recruiter or business developer? And so that's what we're looking for in the earlier stages is more the skills. As we move to the later rounds, we're looking more for culture fit, purpose alignment, all of those things.
You've talked about purpose. Culture fit is sometimes I meet applicants who are frustrated when they hear that phrase because they're not quite sure how to demonstrate culture fit or what that means exactly. From an employer's perspective, Frank, what advice would you have for a candidate who wants to understand an organization's culture and see if it's not only a good fit for them, but to demonstrate to an employer that it would be good for the organization and they would fit into that culture as well?
Sure. That's a great question because a lot of people don't really know what culture is. We throw the word around a lot, but sometimes we're not really super clear on what makes up the culture. I know some people think it's, ping pong tables and nap pods and that kind of thing, but there's a lot more to the culture, and it really gets down to what's the purpose of the organization? Do I align with the purpose of the organization and what they're trying to accomplish? That translates into what's the pace of the organization. Are they trying to grow? Are they a startup and they're trying to grow 400% a year and they expect you to work 60 to 70 hours a week? All of those pieces are part of the culture, and what's the relational levels that you want in the organization? Do you get to know each other socially and personally, or do we just really focus on work in the organization? So as a candidate is interviewing for a job and they ask questions about what does the culture look like? They need to get more specific and is like, what does a typical week look like for someone in this position, and ask those kind of questions so they can understand what the work-life balance looks like, what the social interactions look like. In our organization, we're going to tell you that we expect you to work 40 to 5 hours a week in this job. It's not a straight up 40-hour-a-week job. You're also going to have a one-on-one meeting with your direct supervisor every week. And if we work hybrid, these are the expectations we have when you're on hybrid. These are the hours that you still need to work. You need to be on with your camera on Zoom calls. So asking those kind of questions is all part of the culture, and you're trying to figure out as a candidate whether you align with their culture or not. So the more detailed questions you can ask about what does it really look like to work here, what does the interaction with your boss look like, those kind of questions actually give you a picture of the culture of the organization, and then you can decide if you align with that or not. If they're full in office and you want a hybrid or remote job, that's already an alignment problem. And so those are the kind of questions that you need to be asking during the interview process in order to understand that a little better.
Well, terrific, Frank. We're going to take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, Frank Smith will continue to share his advice on interview red flags from an employer's perspective. You say you learn a new language every year, but few of us actually commit to it. Babbel makes it easy for you to learn one in less time than you think. This year, speak like a whole new you with Babbel, the language learning app that gets you talking. In October, I'm going to Italy for a week for a silent film festival in the city of Pordenone. Babbel is helping me learn the basic phrases I need to talk with locals and find my way around this medieval city. Learn everything you need for your own travels, from vocabulary to culture, while holding your own in conversation with others. With Babbel, it takes only 10 minutes a day. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/dreamjob. Spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Frank Smith. He's the president of Mosaic Personnel. It's a recruiting firm that places great people in the right opportunities. He joins us from Portland, Oregon. Now, Frank, before the break, we were talking about interview red flags from an employer's perspective, and we talked a lot about purpose, knowing what you want, and about culture, and making sure that what you're looking for as a candidate aligns with what an organization offers, and from an employer's perspective, how important it is to that you're looking for candidates who are interested in what an organization offers. That was your, I think, most important red flag. But let's walk through some of the others that can come up in an interview, especially that final round. And another one on your list that you say can disqualify a candidate is the applicant who says in an interview they're applying for one job in the organization, but what really interests them is another position. Why don't hiring managers like you like to hear that, Frank?
Yeah, the reason that we don't like to hear that is because we're interviewing for this current position. I'm not interviewing for the position that you're telling me that you really want. I'm spending my time and effort trying to get a recruiter position filled, and you show up and tell me that you are interested in doing training, really, is what you want to do, and you're just taking this time to try to get your foot in the door and let us know that if that position ever comes open, I'm interested in that. And that's frustrating to us because our focus right now is on hiring this one specific position and not some future position that may come available. And so it feels a little bit like you're wasting our time when we're really trying to get this one position filled. And I see that happen with my clients, and I also see it happen in my own organization quite a bit, where people come in and they'll interview for this, but what they really want, and they'll actually tell you that in the interview, is a different position in the organization, which is kind of frustrating.
Sometimes a candidate, especially with large organizations that might have hundreds or even thousands of jobs, might want a career in that with that employer rather, and they do want to get their foot in the door. What advice would you have for somebody who sees an opening at especially a big employer and thinks, well, my dream is to work at Nike. I'll take any job I can get in order to meet people and move up. What would you recommend to somebody who's thinking that?
First, I would say there's nothing wrong with that approach, but just focus on the job that you're actually interviewing for, and don't already in the interview process be pushing and that you're wanting something else. Focus on the position that you're interviewing for to get your foot in the door, then do that job really well, and the other stuff I find will actually happen later on because you've proven yourself in the job that you got hired for and not something else.
Another red flag that you cite that can disqualify a candidate in that final round of interviews is to badmouth a past employer. Why does this hurt you as a candidate, Frank?
Question that I will always ask is, why are you leaving the current job that you're in, or why did you leave your last job? And if they badmouth their past employer, I know that I'm probably going to be next person that they badmouth when something doesn't go right. People that don't know how to navigate that question, there's a reason you're leaving, but to navigate that well and not badmouth somebody in the process gives me an idea of how well you can handle a social interaction with people, because people are always going to frustrate you. And if you're just can't control that and you're saying things about your past employer, my experience is I become the next person that frustrates you, and then you're going to do the same thing to me inside the organization, possibly, which helps disrupt the culture, which is something that we can't put up with.
What advice do you have for someone who is leaving an employer because they've been treated unfairly, and they're asked that question? What is a good response or principles to follow?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to handle that is to just explain that, I was looking for this and the company couldn't offer that for me as I was trying to get to this point in my career. And so I felt like it was time for me to move on. And you can be vague like that, and it lets your imagination run on what that might have been, but you didn't specifically call out anybody and say that, these people are bad or whatever. You just said, hey, there was an alignment issue here, and I didn't feel like this was helping me accomplish my personal goals. And so I decided to move on for these reasons. And I think that is a way that I would accept from a candidate in an interview process with me, letting me know that, hey, there were some things there, but I'm not going to go into the details, but I just felt like it was best for me to move on and not continue to bang my head against the wall there.
Another red flag you see regularly in finalist interviews is the applicant who hasn't researched a company. Why is this a warning sign for an employer?
It tells you a little bit about the thoroughness of how they're going to do their job. If you are interviewing for our organization, you can't look at our website without understanding that culture is important to us, and that's a big part of what we focus on internally, but also as we help candidates find jobs with companies that have great cultures. And if you haven't researched that on our website and picked that up and asked some questions about our culture or how we do that, that just throws a flag up to me that says you're not as thorough as I'm going to need you to be in your job, because you're trying to get this job. And if you haven't even taken the time to look at the website and figure out who we are, again, it gets back to, I don't really know if you understand what you're trying to accomplish by getting this job.
So look at the website. Any other advice for showing that in that final interview that you've done your homework, Frank?
Yeah, LinkedIn is obviously a lot of way you can, chase down their posts either from people that work there or the company's LinkedIn posts and kind of see what they're posting about. Are they active in the community? Are they working on certain projects that seem exciting to you or whatever. And so if you can connect into their social media, wherever that may be found, and be able to ask some questions about, hey, I saw you guys were doing this as a community project or whatever. Tell me about how you got started in that or whatever. Just shows that you've looked into us, who we are, and want to know a little bit more about why we do some of the things that we do.
Another red flag in that final interview is the candidate who doesn't ask any questions, no questions at all. Why do you as an employer care about this, Frank?
Because I want to know that you're interested in us and that you are doing your due diligence as well. An interview is really a two-sided process. I'm interviewing you to see if I feel like you fit here. You should also be interviewing me to see if I'm a fit for you. And if you don't have any questions at all, then that just tells me that you're not really trying to align. Again, you're just trying to win the interview process. And so you don't have a standard or something that you're trying to measure us against, which tells me a little bit about how you work elsewhere as well. And I always want people that are pushing themselves and trying to say, hey, this meets the standard or this doesn't meet the standard. And if you don't have questions for me, that makes me feel like you don't really have a standard that you're trying for this position to meet up to.
What kind of questions do you recommend an applicant ask in a final interview?
Yeah, it really can be a lot of anything that relates to, how did the company get started? Tell me some of that story. What are some of your passion projects that you're working on? I mean, it really doesn't have to be anything mind-blowing that someone's going to ask. It can just be a simple question to get an understanding better of who the people that you're working with are. I see you guys do some work in the community. Tell me about how you select those projects. I see that culture is important to you. Tell me a little bit about why that's important to you. And just let the CEO or the hiring manager talk a little bit about that and see if their answer resonates with you. Again, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because if it doesn't work for both sides, it's going to be very short-lived.
Struggling with conversation in an interview is another red flag that you've identified. And what do you have in mind here, Frank?
Business is about relationships, and working in an organization is about getting along with your coworkers and being able to communicate well. And if you're in an interview situation, and even if you're introverted, I understand not everybody is a big conversationalist, but if you just answer my questions with the least number of words possible, that throws up a flag for me that says we're probably going to have a hard time having conversations about projects and about things, and especially when they become crucial conversations, you're going to withdraw even more. And so if we can't communicate well with each other, that's a flag for me, because problems are going to come up and we need to be able to communicate to get through those issues. And if all I get from you, even in the interview, which isn't confrontational, is quick one-word answers, that just tells me that you're going to struggle with having conversation. And again, that's part of our culture. Some other company might be less conversational, and that may work well for them. My companies that I run are always very relational, and so I'm looking for those people that can have a good conversation, and that doesn't struggle. Again, you don't have to be, very verbose, but just be able to have and hold a conversation is important, because when things get tough, we need to be able to talk. And this is helping me see that if you can handle an interview situation well.
Well, it's been a terrific conversation, Frank. Now, tell us what's next for you.
Yeah, so I help differentiate our recruiting company by focusing on culture. And I do coaching and training that help companies build a better culture. If you have people, you have problems. I love getting into that and helping companies resolve their people issues and helping their leaders engage with their employees so that you build a great culture. And that's where I spend my time, and that's what I love doing.
I know listeners can learn more about you and your work by visiting your website. That URL is drivinghappinessatwork.com. And that you also invite listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn. And when you do reach out to Frank, please mention you heard him on Find Your Dream Job. Now, Frank, given all the great advice you've shared today, What's the one thing you want a listener to remember about interview red flags from an employer's perspective?
The number one thing I would tell someone is to know what you want out of this job. Why does this job help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in your life? And that's going to excite me as the interviewer to know that this job resonates with you. It helps you get where you're trying to go. And that tells us we have the best chance of actually connecting together and working well together.
Next week, our guest will be Kai River. They are the Human Resources Administrator at Habitat for Humanity, Portland region. It's part of a global nonprofit housing organization that works across the United States and in 70 countries. There's only so much room on a page, and that space can seem even smaller when you make your case that you're the best person for the job. Join us next Wednesday when Kai River and I talk about how to write a cover letter that makes you stand out. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton Huff schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislenberry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer is Carly Ream Neal. Our editor is Matt Fiorillo. Dawn Mole creates our transcripts, and our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Matt Pritchard. See you next week.